film theme songs going on. Hey, thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed the film. I was kind of watching a little bit of it. They had like a monitor in one of the rooms backstage, and I saw that they did the David Byrne Take a Break card, which always kind of freaks people out. Actually, they were like, hey, there's a thing, it just stops in the middle. Is this like right? I'm like, yeah. But there's like a dozen cards that you could choose there that then would divert the film, or the film would respond somehow, or unlock scenes that you only see. If that card comes up, then Laurie Anderson also comes up and picks a bunch of cards too sometimes, so depending on who comes up there, the film will respond, but that's just kind of a funny one because this whole thing, the system just shuts down, basically. Did you think it was like some mistake? No? You're okay with it? It was intermission, yeah, it was like a 10-second intermission. That's what they thought, the theater thought too, though. We weren't sure if it was an intermission or not. So as you see the film, there's a lot going on there. You know, it's the system is pulling from this much larger pool of footage and scenes, and all that stuff is happening in real time. Even we call those things glitches. They're the like a little code or frames scrubbing through or bursts of footage. Those are completely different every time. The system is making those as it goes. It's not like a little piece of video, we put it in there. Actually, the whole thing is different than you would think it would be. If you think of film as this like linear timeline that you're putting clips into and kind of making it like this, that's not what this is. It's almost like a list of instructions that the software is just saying, okay, go find something, do this, find another thing, you know, figure out what could go after that. There is some structure to the film because I didn't want it to be just like this random mashup of clips. I wanted it to have some structure and feel like a cinematic documentary, like any of the other films I've done. So there are things like the opening scene with Brian in the studio and that last scene in the Rose Garden talking about art and feelings. Those are kind of like the bookends. They recur every time. And then there's a couple other scenes in the film that also will recur. It's maybe like 25 or 30% is a recurring, and then 70 or 75% every time you watch it, it's a different, or can be different clips or scenes or music in those places. So the challenge, or the thing that took us a long time, years of programming and also working with all the footage, is to make it still feel like it works like as a film. Every time, and that there's a sort of a story that you're kind of putting together about Brian. That is it's a different story every time, a little bit different or a lot different, but that it still kind of works as a story. Since it's all about one person, that kind of helps something like this, because you could learn about something, or Bowie or whatever, or not learn about it, or be in a different place, and you'd still sort of put those pieces together in your head. And I like that idea of a film that you as the viewer need to kind of, you need to make the connections. We do that anyway with normal linear films. Every scene we're like, okay, we're getting a little information, story information, linking it to the next thing, processing it. Well, in this film you get to do that, and then you can watch it again and you kind of do it in a slightly different way every time, because you might see a scene that you've seen before, but now there's a different scene after it, and you make another connection about Brian, and you just, Brian, something that he said a lot was like, there's never only one story about anyone or anything. Everyone in this room has got way more story and way more to talk about their lives than you could just cram into an 85-minute documentary. So yeah, this is kind of a way to maybe, I don't know, make it, it's kind of like how memory works too. Like, we never remember memories in the exact chronological order. We never remember them the same way every time. We are constantly kind of rewriting the stories about ourselves. And as we get older, things like that maybe didn't seem very important, then become very important. It's always changing. So yeah, like, why can't film do that too? That was my goal with this. It's like, I love film, linear film, it's amazing, but like, really, it's like 140 years or something, like, really like the Lumiere brothers, I think they tried to have it. That's the perfect form of this medium. It's like, we were so wowed by the moving image that we kind of it's interesting because we didn't have the capability as filmmakers to make a film that could change every time. So we haven't really had like a reason to even think about, well, how would we structure a story, or how would we write a screenplay for a fiction film that could change? We just didn't have even a reason to do that. So now that we do, I think that's really interesting. It's like, think about this idea and extrapolate out to other types of films and in other types of functionality too. And I'm convinced that like our grandchildren or great-grandchildren are gonna be like, really, you guys watch the same thing over and over? Yeah, same, never change, same thing over and over and over again. It just seems kind of, I don't know, it seems sort of strange to me now that I've been working this way for the past 5 years. But anyway, questions? Anybody just shout it out. You.
So I think this is an obvious question. Where does it live now? How do we see it again so we don't see it again?
How can you watch it again? Well, funny you should ask. But tomorrow at noon, we're doing a 24-hour live stream version where it's multiple unique versions of the film kind of around the clock, but also all kinds of extra stuff too, conversations with Brian, other like concert footage, things we didn't use, because it's really impossible to stream this, like, none of the streamers have the technology to do dynamic content that's different for you and you and you and you and you, like simultaneously. They just don't, that's not what they do now.
You have to follow? I know about the 24-hour thing, but, like, but even after that, like how is it going to be like living on a server in a loop somewhere where you can subscribe to it?
Sure. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's.
Age subscriber fee. Age expectancy. Well, I dream every day.
Wow. Yeah. That's a good thing. You do a physical. You do take a physical. It's like insurance, like life insurance. And then we guesstimate how long you're going to live, and we prorate the thing. Yeah.
Like life insurance.
100%. We're definitely going to do that. I mean, this is the fun part of this. So for now, all we've been doing is showing it in theaters because our system can just output a ProRes file, and it's doing like a dynamic 5:1 surround mix in real time of each version, and then we can play it in a normal theater projection system, or I can bring our systems out on stage and make the film in real time. So that's kind of doable, and I think that's like kind of the coolest thing about it, like that idea that's it's just for us. And you can see a band, even if it's doing the same set list that we played tonight, or they're changing it. Two shows, and the filmmaker is going to show your film. It's kind of like if you were a band and you made a record, and your concert was you just going and pressing play on the record and walking off the stage. Because that's what it's like. We sit the same thing every single time. So I wanted to do that thing where I could be surprised by the movie, along with everybody else. And just I don't know what's gonna happen, but it's just for us, let's watch. And that's what we just did. So a lot of the streaming stuff is really just, we're experimenting. The 24-hour live stream is the first time we've ever streamed it. It's the past year, it's just been in theaters, and we've shown, I've made probably 600 or 700 versions of the film so far. So we're experimenting with different things. Brendan and I have a startup called Animorph. Animorph is going to do this live stream thing tomorrow, and then we're just playing around with other, the kind of highest goal, I don't know, maybe is that everybody gets their own version when they stream it. or it's different every day, or there's a bunch of ways we can do it. I think the different every day is kind of an easy one, but even that, like Netflix, was just like, no, we can't do that. Like, really, I can't just give you 365 files? No, that's too much. We got 240 territories. All these reasons why they can't do something that's different. But I think those places need to do something different because they're all fucking the same. Like, just scroll through the streaming platforms and tell me they're not identical. If you hid the logo, you wouldn't know where you were. It's like they're all kind of doing exactly the same thing. So there can be something different, and that's what I'm hoping to do. So, really, no one in the back? All right, you. How many hours of footage? So Brian's archive is 500 hours. It took us 2 years to digitize all that stuff. That's not all in the data set. I mean, we change it. I mean, I just added something last week. So it's a constant evolution. I think we did 50 hours of filming with him over a 2-year period, of like the conversations that we did. So I've kind of lost track of what's actually in the data set at any given time. Because again, it's a constant process. It never has to just be like locked and done. You know, we keep finding new things, or we keep changing the software, or adding different functionality, or responding to things that happened, like by mistake. Like that, we call that the trauma glitch. That thing happened tonight. That was an actual thing that happened at one of the film forum things where it just kind of went into like a deep dive into the material and it didn't want to come out. Like we let the system kind of like in those little transitions, they're like, all right, go in, look around for 2 seconds, pick something and go. Sometimes it goes in and it doesn't want to come out. And it did that we didn't really, it slipped by us and it did that for 10 minutes. In like, but with grandpa, and it was funny, like I found out about it on Facebook. People were talking about, is that like, I think the system crashed. Oh no, I thought that was intentional. Like there was a whole debate over whether it was a mistake or not. But so then we actually let it do it and we put a soundtrack, let it pick a soundtrack to it. But so yes, the answer is there's lots. I can keep adding more stuff. We can change things. This is generation 4, so it's the 4th major revision of the software and content. But it just keeps growing. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, you. How have I interpreted my own dreams? So the question is partly like seeing the different versions and working with the process of the software. Like, has my interpretation of Brian changed? Absolutely. Like every time I see it, I see some little new connection because I've never seen 2 pieces of footage kind of juxtaposed together in a certain way. And that's great. That's kind of what I was talking about before. This like you make different connections each time you watch. And then yeah, I don't think it's affected how I dream, but the way I interpret my dreams, no, I think they're pretty much the same. But thank you. Go ahead. What was the most interesting thing we found in Brian's archives? Wow. The whole thing about he bought a video camera in 1980 and just started filming things in New York, and then got into kind of video art projects and cameras. We found a lot of amazing stuff. And a lot of times we use it a lot. There's other places in the film where you're seeing stuff that kind of looks low-res video-ish, or art-ish, but it's actually Brian's like things. there was stuff like, he would just be recording over VHS tapes, so we would find a tape and it would be like MASH, last episode. And you'd put it in, and it would be 40 minutes of the last episode of MASH, and then suddenly he'd like turn the thing on and he was like in the kitchen, like dancing and headphones on and stuff. Like shit. It was great. That is in there in the early, like very one of the opening scenes. I think some of that's in there. So it was, so we had to watch 500 hours of footage. It took 2 years. But there's great stuff. There's things that he had not seen in 40 years, or maybe had never actually watched. So that was cool. But yeah, dancing in the kitchen, surprising. Some other stuff that did not make it into the film that is also surprising. Go ahead.
How would you rank this version in like a pecking order?
How to rank this version? I didn't watch the whole thing. I was also watching it like without sound. I've seen it enough now. Even, I mean, that's the kind of ironic thing. Like I was originally like, oh, I want my film to be different so I could watch it more. After like 100 events and like 100 viewings with audiences, I'm kind of done. But I can still appreciate the differences and everything like that. But yeah, this is part of the thing. It doesn't matter what I think. Like I don't feel like I'm directing in the traditional sense. Like I'm making this bigger structure in which the film can make itself. And my perfect version of the film would be different than your perfect version and your perfect version of everyone else. So it takes some of the subjectivity out of filmmaking in a way, but it's kind of like, that's fine. It's like how Brian makes music. The whole thing is so organic to his process. And that idea of you're planting the seeds for a film, and then the film kind of grows organically, and we can shape it, and I guess I curate all the kind of ingredients that could be in there, but I'm not like micromanaging it, And I have to be okay with how it turns out. It does things sometimes that I would not do, me personally, but other people love it, and like it's just all opinion. So that's again one of the reasons that Ryan wanted to do the project, was that it wasn't like one person's version of his story, like that his story could kind of tell itself and retell itself. Oh my gosh, on the aisle there, go.
Hi, yeah, so I have two questions. The first is, with a film with so much of an archive, how do you decide what doesn't make the cut? And the second question is the metadata for the Philadelphia experience specifically retained so that way you could re-show, oh, this was the Philly one, or is that just gone forever now?
Yeah. What was the first question?
You have so many tens of hours of archival footage. How do you decide what doesn't get retained?
So that ends up being kind of the direct part, because like me and we have 3 editors in the project, and Brandon, who's the director of programming. I mean, we watch everything, and we're just like, this is something we think should be in there. For me, the criteria was, I wanted to make a film about creativity. That was the core of the film. It is the core of the film. And pretty much everything he talks about in the film, whatever comes up, there is probably some creative lesson in there or a takeaway. And that's what I wanted to talk about. That's like the Venn diagram overlap with my design trilogy films and the other films I've done. They're all about creative process. So that was what we looked for. We wanted things that even if he's talking about Bowie, he's still talking about Oakley strategies and what that is, and mixing up, your approach and stuff. So it had to have something to say about creativity. And then I don't save the versions. Like again, you guys watch that. It only lives on in your memory now, nowhere else. There is a log of everything that the system does, like a text log. If I did want to, we could like kind of sort of recreate it, but it would never be the same. It might have the same kind of pieces to it, but it would assemble it in a slightly different way. So yeah, the outputs are weirdly kind of ephemeral. Like I don't keep them because I'm never going to show it again. So what do we need to do? And I can just make another one. just click generate and out it comes. This is a little group. You guys, can you decide amongst yourselves who
I'm curious about your touch in terms of like the micro compositions. Like I noticed there were portions where there obviously an edit has been made, voiceovers
Sure.
carrying over like
Yep.
multiple clips. And I'm curious, like in the making process of this, like how has that affected your approach, whether it's like in the edit or as you kind of like back away from being in the edit, like where are the moments where you still want to kind of like exert your hand versus letting the machine kind of
Yeah.
do it?
So I mean, the editing. So there are like pre-edited scenes, and then there are scenes that the software is basically kind of making, and it's a mix every time, every iteration. And the pre-edited scenes. I mean, like I said, I had amazing editors, Maya Tippett and Marley McDonald. They put so much work into it, and it terrified them, you know, as editors, because they're used to total control of the story. Like, how do you edit a scene? How do you get into a scene or get out of a scene if you have no idea what's going to come before or after it? So it was a challenge for them to kind of rethink how they would normally work. And I don't know. I guess I have a thing, or you know, you watch something and you're like, yeah, I like that, or I don't like that. And there's probably a holdover. I don't know who's seen any of my other films in here, but there's probably a commonality to some of the construction of the scenes from things I've done before. But part of why I wanted to do this approach too was to like get out of that sort of loop of making kind of the similar film or similar approach or similar music use or whatever. You know, I think we all get into those sort of tropes or habits when we're doing any kind of creative thing, and I wanted to break that out, and that's kind of what this did. What is my next project? You're looking at it. I mean, you just looked at it. It's again so strange. Filmmaking has this past tense kind of thing about it. I made a film and a while ago, and I'm just going to keep showing the same film now, and like nothing changes with it. And this is like present tense filmmaking. I mean, I just made this thing. I'm making it every day. So there's not. Weirdly, I feel like I'm still at the beginning of the process. There's so much more to explore with ENO and then other films, because now we're working with other filmmakers and other studios to make their films do this or versions of this. So that's exciting. Like I still like design. I'm still obsessed with design. So I do have a design project that's kind of floating in the background somewhere. But and I don't know. I just had this conversation. Like, it's probably not going to be generative. Like, there's no you have to ask yourself, like, why? Like, there's a reason for this film to do what it does because of the subject matter and the approach. There's other films that doesn't make sense to, and that's fine. You know. So yeah, I don't know. I'm deep into this still, and the software, and then the next version of the software, and the live stream thing tomorrow. I mean, I got to drive back to Woodstock, New York, right after this screening, because this live stream starts tomorrow at noon. We have a lot of work to do still. So yeah, so I'm still kind of doing it, which again, totally different than a normal film process. Totally different. I would have been locked at Sundance when we premiered it a year ago, and that's it. We would have been done. But this is a different thing. Go ahead. Yeah. Ah, wow. Yeah. Yeah. So the overall arc or the things that are recurring, I agree. There's a cool thing about seeing scenes. I think they're very sort of pivotal scenes, and Brian really gets his, his big ideas across. But yeah, those change each time. Each generation, you've reshuffled that. Maybe that one doesn't appear every time, and now it only appears every 10 times or something. And there's a new thing that we've got that we want to be there. So it is this constant kind of iteration and playing with the story and evolving it. Again, there is this danger of just getting too obsessed with it and just continuing on and never wanting to stop there. You do need to end things at some point, and I'm sure that I will at some stage, but it's still just so much fun, and it's so, it's really kind of liberating. Again, it's so different than what I would normally do. And once you kind of get that sense of freedom, like, you're not so precious about how the film kind of itself turns out, because we spent thousands of hours and just amazing people working on it to the point where I can kind of like let go of it a little bit in the day-to-day versions, but I just keep dreaming of all the things that we could do. So I want to keep exploring. We've got time for 2 more questions. Go. So this is the 4th generation, or basically it's like the 4th version of the bigger platform. And the question is there anything, for a while there's a Devo scene that I didn't see for a long time. I don't know what the bias was against Devo, but it took a long time for me to ever see the Devo scene. Now I see it more often, but for a while there it was just sort of like, it was sort of buried. I've seen pretty much everything. Just again, I've seen it 100 times with audiences or made it on stage and watched every second of it. So I've seen most of the major footage. It's the way that it recombines that's different each time. But yet we've still got hours and hours and hours of more footage that could come in. I think there's a sense among our team that we could get a little bit weirder than we do. That there's a lot of stuff that it's still. There was a lot of talk about like how much should it change, should it be structure versus randomness and that sort of thing. But I think we could still play with that a little bit more. Way in the back. Yeah, one of you. No, you two. Yeah.
I'm curious to know, within the 30% that is a constant, are you feeling to hit certain breakpoints, like Rocky Felt, Falling Heads? Are there versions where there is no
Yeah. Well, there's definitely versions where there's no Roxy music. There's versions where there's no Talking Heads, or maybe there's just that little snippet of them. It really depends. But this is what I asked Brian early on. I'm like, can there be a version of this movie that does not mention the words Roxy music? And he was like, hell yeah. It's like, why should this thing that I did 50 years ago for 18 months, why should you have to talk about that every single time you talk about me? I've done all these other things. So I guess, yeah, you can have, Bowie is in every single one. Because that Oblique Strategies card scene with Brian talked about Bowie, that sort of has to happen for then Lori or David to pick a card, and for that even to make a kind of sense, you need to kind of see that. So Bowie is in every one, but he could be in more too. There's more Bowie. Okay, one last question. Way back. Yes.
music licensing? How was that handled?
Music licensing? What's that? Just kidding. So this is another thing with this approach for this film. Lots of music, lots of like big name artists, and you're only seeing a fraction of the music in any iteration. So I tried to argue that like, well, the song's only going to appear like 5% of the time, so can I pay you 5% of the fee? But the music publishers and the record labels did not buy that argument. So we had to license a lot of music, since Brian is pretty much involved somehow in everything that's in there, everybody was really just gave us a great rate. So Bowie and U2 and all that stuff that would normally independent film could afford, since it was about Brian. He was involved in the project. They were cool. Yeah, there's a soundtrack album too, which is similar. We gave Brian here's the 80 songs of yours that we used in the film, and he picked 17 of them to be like the soundtrack, which is actually a really cool mix of his stuff. It's not like a greatest hits. It's a lot of collabs and a lot of just interesting things. But it's it's been fascinating. I mean, this has been a crazy project, and continues to be, as I said. Hopefully y'all can, some of you see this 24-hour thing. Otherwise, we'll have other streaming opportunities coming along soon. And it's been so cool to come to Philly and finally come to Philly. We couldn't find a theater before. That was why. It was an availability thing, but now we're here. Thank you so much for coming out. And we'll see you soon. Cheers.